Hi everyone, Vanessa Alcoholic. Today I want to talk to you about making changes in sobriety. These are not the kind of changes that you think that I'm going to talk about. These are not about, new friends or, people, places, things like that. Like, although I guess this kind of ties into that. Kind of changes that I'm talking about are the life-changing ones. Getting sober is one of them for sure. But also, I feel like in the first year of sobriety, I heard a lot about, don't make any big changes. Like, sober people are treated so delicately, like we're such fragile, like time bombs, like anything will set us off. And to a certain extent, that's true. We're just so sensitive to, and life is so raw when we take off the armor of drugs and booze and codependency, gambling, sex, love, all these things, right? And so we're very raw to actually just the world. And in fact, I think that that's why we get into all of those other, not super healthy behaviors because we need some kind of an armor. And we don't think that we're enough to kind of face the world on our own. And so, what I was told in the beginning of sobriety is like, don't make any big changes. Well, I ended up having to make a lot of changes. I changed my job. I changed where I lived. I changed, more importantly, more than anything, I changed my thoughts. I changed the way that I had to think about everything that I was going through because the way that I had been thinking about it in this pity, poor me, life is always change, throwing the most difficult things towards me. Like this is all a challenge. Everything is working against me. Like that mindset wasn't getting me anywhere, and it was making me really defensive and in fear mode all of the time. And I just didn't want to live like that. And so something that I had to change was the way that I perceive the world around me. And it was with baby steps, for sure. Sometimes it was through toxic positivity, and hey, that got me through it. And I did what I had to do. And that honestly worked for me because once I was able to view things as, yeah, it's that cliche of like things are working for me, not against me or whatever. Um, it really did enable me. It kind of armored me up in this other way of just being able to remove the armor, being like, oh, there is no war going on in my life. That was just a series of me making really terrible decisions. And now I get to correct some of those decisions. And so kind of what I want to talk about is, that there is that mindset that needs to change, but also what kind of changes can you make or do you need to make? Like I said, I had to change where I lived. I went into a sober living. I changed my job, somewhere where I could talk openly about my addiction and recovery, with a boss who was very understanding. I had where I wasn't so ashamed. That was important to me to be in a place where I didn't feel shame. So I kind of let go of all of that because I felt like those things were just, I just kind of picture myself as just like a hatching almost, like all that protective little fragile shell that I had made around me. Like I just kind of had to break through, and that was created out of, lies, shame, just embarrassment, also just an over fear, overall, also just not knowing what to do, like how to do things. So, um, that being said, so I made a lot of changes that first year. And I was understandably pretty skeptical about a lot of the changes that I made in my first year. Because I had a history of making bad decisions. And the reason for that is because I was making a lot of impulsive decisions. I did not stop to think. And I still can have this mentality of like, oh, this is happening. I'm going to decide this. Like I just want to move quick. I want to make decisions. I want to move fast, break things, and I can't do that, especially when other people are involved. I cannot ethically do that in a lot of ways, especially because my main motivator for making so many decisions and changes in the beginning came from a place of fear and anxiety and ego. And it's like, as long as I came from a place, as long as I was making my decisions from that place, my decisions were going to blow up on me. There was not going to be a good way for me to make decisions when I was in uh, fight or flight, short-sighted, immediate survival mode. And I did the best that I could for the time that I did. And I know absolute certainty that God's hand was just like protecting me in a lot of the decisions that I'd made in the past and will continue to for any all the other bad decisions that I make in the future. Um, I realized I had to stop making decisions from that place of fear and really come from, is something, in alignment with me? Is this someone who I want to become? Is this really someone who, when I sit in that contemplative prayer, when I sit in contemplation around who I was created to be, who I am, who I want to be, um, what naturally feels like it is in alignment with my um, morals or my values, or sometimes it's just as simple as, is this something that excites me? Is this something that brings me joy? Is this something that brings me dread because I'm afraid of it? Or is it dread because it's going to cause me to get out of my comfort zone? And I feel a lot of these things in my body. I feel like this is why I've been so obsessed about embodiment in the last 2 years, because I've been so out of touch with my body. I've been so out of touch with that, because a lot of that is numbing through alcohol or compulsive eating or sex and love or shopping even. It's just, these are all efforts to get out of my body. And so when I'm able to sit with that and be like, make a decision and just really kind of rely on my guts to be like, yes, that's a yes, that's a full body yes, or that's a full body no. Somebody asked me to do something the other day, and I just couldn't. I mean, I probably didn't have to say this, but I was like, that is a full body no. Me, I don't want to do that. And I could have said that more elegantly, I think, but it's just, I don't know how to do that. Not a super elegant person in that way. Um, but all of that to say that when I began to kind of tune in more to my body as far as like the decisions that I was making, the decisions that I made became way less scary. It was less of an effort. Um, and I also have to be careful not to overthink this, right? Because it's like, I really do just have the questions that I just asked are just the questions that I go through when I'm about to make a decision about something. And I'm saying all this in preparation to tell you that I'm going to make a big decision here pretty soon. But I also just need to make sure that I am using certain things as like guideposts for me. One way that I also sense if I need to make a decision, like the one that I'm going to be making soon, and change something without um, risking my sobriety or my spiritual health, is to I've noticed in my past that whenever I start to cling to something, like it's a pretty good indicator that I need to let it go. So whenever I start to cling to an expectation of something, I'm like, oh, I'm putting some weird expectations on this thing that I don't have any control over, that I can be okay with either way. But it's interesting that I'm putting so much emphasis on this certain outcome. So it's probably a pretty good indicator to me that I should probably place some distance between me and this thing, this outcome, the situation, or learn to just let go of my expectation of the outcome. But something happens to me last week when I had a conversation with somebody, and my impulse, like my gut was like, "Oh no, we're in danger," and it was literally just. It's not actually anything where I'm physically in danger, but I felt like it was endangering my financial health, right? Which is a whole other thing that I really, as I continue to heal that part of myself in my journey, I will probably make another completely separate video about my financial health. But and so I felt like this clinging and like, oh no, things can't change. If things change, then I will be screwed. And one, that's putting my security, my okayness, my safety in money, which I'm never really comfortable with, and in this specific thing. And I don't like that feeling. My ultimate security, my ultimate okayness, my ultimate wealth will always and only depend and rely on what comes to me from God, right? And so when I got that instinct, I was like, my initial thing was like, I need to do everything. I'm going to start overperforming. I'm going to start being super productive. I'm going to start like that's my survival mechanism. These are the tools that I've used in the past to survive, to get what I've needed to get. Because I was in fear that nobody else was going to get these things for me. So I had to manhandle situations to make sure that I can manipulate and get whatever it is that I needed. And I began to feel that way about the situation, and I was like, oh no. And I completely had to let down all my guards and be like, I need to be okay with letting this go. And so I've been sitting with it, and I was like, God, am I supposed to let this go? And I just felt like an immediate lightness. And it was like, yes, let this go. Which my rational mind is like, that's gonna put you in kind of a predicament financially, possibly. I don't know for sure, honestly. I could probably swing it, but the story that I've told myself is that I needed this thing to be okay. And the reality is, like, I can find a million other ways to be okay, you know? So I'm like, okay, something that I need to consider. So now I always know too when a decision is aligned for me, or is coming from God, is more in aligned with God's will, when I know it's the right thing and I just don't want to do it. Because there's something about leaving, because I could have taken the other approach, which I think I initially did, was like, well, screw this. I'm just going to leave. I'm just going to leave them high and dry, let them figure it out, you know? And then I was like, oh no, I'm going to overfix. I'm going to compulsively fix this. I'm going to make it okay. Then they'll really see my value. And so, like, and this is in the course of like 24 hours, you guys. I swung from like, screw them, they can figure it out on their own, I'm leaving, to, oh no, I need to fight for this. I need to keep this. I absolutely will not let this out of my grasp. To, honestly, I can be okay. They can be okay. The situation is not the issue. It's my story. It's the story that I'm telling myself about what's happening here, that I actually need to remove this thing and see where that takes me. Because in a lot of ways I was using it as a crutch, basically. And it's going to hurt in other ways that will require me to rely on God. Like, there's a part of my ego that is very attached to this thing. And to and like just like the association that comes with it, and the sentimentality that I have behind it, you know, I need to become like compassionate to myself for like understanding that, like, oh, your ego does want that. Yeah. That is something that it wants. Oh, that is something that you feel adds to your worthiness, but you have that worthiness with or without this thing, you know? And so it's like having those very frank conversations with myself. And it's like, okay, now, I want to look at my notes real quick. That being said, there is this, you know, because that decision is not coming from a place of fear, I feel a sense of like, yeah, joy, you know, and I kind of talked about that already, just like that lightness of like, oh, this does feel aligned, yeah, with what I'm looking for or what I'm needing to do. And the reality is that there is unknown beyond that, right? Like, I don't know what's going to happen when I like get this and go. Um, but I need, and I feel this unwavering faith that God will catch me. And this is great because even if it's a bad decision that I make, even if I'm misreading all the cues somehow, and God is like, please don't do that. Um, there will be a way where I will not be able to let it go. Like, this is just, I just have faith in this is how life works. There will be something that stops that from happening. You know, there will be something, I don't know. I just have, or I will just be caught in some other way, you know. Um, and I just have faith that that is the way that life works, because that is the evidence from my history and from my past. Every time that I thought something was absolutely crumbling and just like a disaster, it turned out, for better or worse, whether the decision was a good one or a bad one, right? If we want to add judgment words to life changes, then it will inevitably sort itself out. I mean, you can even look at, my three DUIs, which I think is how a lot of people got to this channel to begin with. If I even look at my three DUIs, anybody looking at that is like, that is not a good decision. There's no way that consciously or unconsciously getting three DUIs was a good idea. Um, but since I've been able to face that and to direct that energy that I had, from being, oh, why is this happening to me? Like, oh, this has happened to me, because of these other decisions that I've made. Now I can really look at that and change it, right? And I love, I think it's Richard Rohr who says, pain that is not transformed is transferred. And I see it in society all the time. And even in my mystical sobriety journey, just seeing, I said, I talked about this a little bit in the last video, seeing the traumas or the big T, little t traumas that my parents have gone through and how all of that changed their worldview and has now been inherited by me and my sister. And now we're kind of reevaluating some of those things, and also, and add to that my own traumas, big T, little t, and how their worldview impacted my worldview about those things. And I'm just like, oh, having to untangle and unlearn so much of that, right? Um, the same thing with these decisions, because I feel like a lot of people can look at society and culture, can look at the three DUIs and be like, well, that was bad. And these are not good decisions having the three DUIs. But the way that I've chosen to take that and try to make that positive experience, not just for myself, but for other people, on a big or small scale, quite honestly, is really what I feel like people can look at now, right? And same thing with a lot of decisions that I've made, even though they look, um, even with like my job, if I look at my job, I had left a pretty stable company that I'd been with for 5 years to go to the job that I'm currently at now, which was a little startup that was doing a lot of things different from traditional, industry traditional stuff. And I was told, well, when they go out of business, you can always come back, And I was like, oh, we are not going out of business. And so I put everything into it, and it's now where I work, and it's literally a dream job that I put on a vision board, 6 years ago. So there's that. And anyway, where am I going with this? Yeah, just understanding that either way, God's got me, in any way. And I just need to be careful about the story that I tell myself about any of the consequences of my actions, good or bad, that happen, to just remember that it's all just part of the process. And as long as I'm coming from a place of genuine love and desire to be in God's alignment, instead of just really trying to roar through and force things for my own will, for my own ego, for my own safety, for my own security, for my own financial this or reputation that, as long as I'm able to, in ultimately removing fear from that as much as possible, which is, I'm not going to say it's impossible, but I was thinking about the other day how cringe it used to be that I'd be asked to speak at meetings, and oh my gosh, it's so cringe now, but it's a reflection of where I was at in my recovery, when I would talk about, fear and faith can't exist in the same place. And, that really satiated the all or nothing part of me. And that's probably mostly when I was in my toxic positivity phase. But the reality is, like, they absolutely exist at the same place. I can totally be afraid of doing something and have faith that it will still work out. So, um, I think I just want to leave you guys with something to like contemplate about your own lives and making decisions, especially if you were looking to get sober or thinking about getting sober. And some questions I would, if you even want to journal these, or just meditate on them, or just sit with them. These are not questions that are meant to be, this is not a pop quiz you need to answer and complete in 15 minutes. Like, these are just questions that I really want you to sit with and like feel in yourself, like what the truthiest truth is for you. So before you make a decision, you can ask yourself, is this coming from a place of fear? Am I afraid for myself in any way, shape, or form, for my family, for my money, for my reputation, um, for my status, is the decision that you're trying to make, is this coming from a place of fear? Is this truly aligned with who you want to become and who you see yourself becoming? Um, if you had this, idealized version of yourself who could exist in 5 years, does this decision align with who that person is? Um, and is this ultimately in alignment with God's will, or are you really trying to wrangle and manhandle that your expectations? Because there is, without judgment here, selfishness at the root of it. That you must have this status, wealth, reputation, person, relationship, whatever. Or is this because you know that this is collectively what you have to add to the collective, the world at large, and you feel like this is your place in the world and this is who you need to become? Does that decision align with that? Um, do you believe that you'll be okay even if this doesn't go the way that you think it's supposed to go? Do you really believe that you can be okay letting go of your expectations? Do you really believe that God, your higher power, spirit, universe, has your back, regardless if you make the good or bad decision? So spend some time with that. I hope that you have an amazing day. And just kind of as a side note, I have a friend named Jackie who is in northern Israel right now, which is in a bit of danger. So if you're a praying person, if you please pray for her safety, I would greatly appreciate that. All right. Thank you everyone for being here. Please leave me a comment. Let me know what you think about those questions and about this topic in general. All right. I love you. Bye.